What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today, well, I'm wearing my old school wrinkled up Corvette shirt in remembrance of my ZR1 that I just sold. I'm still kind of salty about that, but we're going to have to move on, and we are going to be working on the Camaro today. Now, I know you guys have been looking for some content on the Camaro. I did do those taillights that you guys have already seen that, but today we have to fix the fact that I haven't been able to drive it. Now, one of the reasons I talked about in a video that I talked about all the things that were wrong with it. I'll list that video up above here, but the power steering's leaking. It literally leaks just about as fast as I can pull it in or pour it in. So we are going to be replacing the rack. I'm going to replace the power steering pump and probably replace the lines as well. But what we need to do is we need to get this up off the ground. Once I get it off the ground, you're going to be able to see probably a couple leaks underneath it because it's pretty gross, and you're going to be able to see the tires are both scrubbed off. So we're going to also replace the tie rod ends and maybe even the ball joints. But what I'm going to concern myself with today is getting all the power steering stuff out of the way. So let's get this thing off the ground and start taking that stuff apart. So actually, before I get it off the ground, I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, I'm going to unhook the battery, and once I get the battery unhooked, then I'm going to go and take the air lid off and get it out of the way, just so I have a little bit more access to the power steering pump itself. Then we'll get it up off the ground. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to pull the alternator off, and that is the reasoning behind me wanting to loosen the battery. But we'll see when we get down there. Maybe we'll be able to get lucky and not have to pull it off, but let's get this out of the way. Actually, one more thing before I get it up off the ground. I know I keep saying I'm going to take it off the ground, but I'm going to try to get out as much fluid as possible. And, well, I'm just using like a turkey baster to suck everything out. Most of it's drained out on the ground or flung everywhere all over the engine bay. But we might as well try to get as much out as we can. Well, it's got something. Now that I got it off the ground, you can see I have a little bit of a puddle of power steering fluid, and then look at the inside of the tires. They are both completely scrubbed off, so that's another reason why I haven't been driving it. I could keep filling it with power steering fluid, but the tires they're not safe. So I'm not gonna be driving around on crappy tires, just not my thing. But you can also see how bad the leak is. I mean, it's just completely coated down there. So our next step is we're gonna get the wheels and tires off, and then we're going to knock the tie rod ends loose. Now, once we have the car off the ground, the wheels off, we need to take this cotter pin out that holds the top of the castle nut here. And generally I just cut these off. Sometimes you're able to use a pair of needle nose pliers and get them out of the way. This may have to be a camera set down move here. Alright, so now we are going to take the tie rod loose, the tie rod in, the castle nut here, and that is just an 18 millimeter, and this thing looks like it's been underwater or something. Kind of rusty on the bottom side, but hey, 200,000 mile car, you gotta remember that. It's not a show queen. We're just trying to get it to be drivable for now. Once we get that off, we may have to tap this a couple times. Honestly, since I'm replacing the ball joint or the tie rod end, you could hit this and hammer it out that way. It isn't gonna hurt anything. So here's where things get tricky if you've never replaced one of these before, or it's the factory one in the car. Both the nuts or the bolts that come into the rack come down from the bottom. So if you're taking this one loose, which is a 15 on one side and 18 on the other, you're gonna have to lift the motor up in order to get this out. Now this guy has actually replaced this rack before. He replaced a leaky rack with another leaky rack instead of buying a different one. Don't know why people would do that, but anyway, he reversed these bolts. So at least on this side, this is the only one you have to pull the motor up for. The bolt is actually coming in from the bottom and the nut is on the top side, which is awesome because I don't have to lift the motor up. You can see this thing is completely coated in oil. We're gonna have to address that down the road. But for now, let's go ahead and take these two out. Like I said, it's 15 on one side, 18 on the other. We're gonna get these out of the way. I'm probably gonna reverse both bolts because, well, why not, if I can get that other one out. And the reason I'm doing this first before I unhook the lines is because I don't wanna be laying under here in a puddle of power steering fluid. So you can go ahead and crack the lines open if you wanted, but I just wanted to be as clean as possible. And then I'm gonna go get something to try to catch the fluid as it comes out of that. Well, now that we got those bolts out, and I did drop a nut back here, but I'll be able to get to it once I get the rack out of place. We're gonna go ahead and take an 18 millimeter and we're gonna crack these lines loose. Now I do have a catch underneath. Holy cow. I really need a tripod, guys. A little one that goes under the car. As you can see, I swung a little too crazy and, well, you've seen what happened. It happens sometimes when you're filming. Anyway, let's get these loose. And this is gonna make an incredible mess, which I hate, but the bottom of this car is a mess, so I guess it doesn't really matter. And once we get this out of the way, then we will get the 11 millimeter bolt that goes into the steering shaft off there. And we may have to take both the upper and the lower off. Sometimes it doesn't want to slide back out of the way, but here comes the mess. It's got the nice new clear fluid I put in it down here at the bottom. And then you got to get this top one off. Hopefully I don't hit the camera again. I didn't. There's nothing worse than like fluid running down your arm while you're working on a car. I don't know if it bugs you guys, but it bothers me because then it like runs into my shirt. Yuck. Yuck. Alright, now we got two really leaky lines. Now, I don't know if you guys can see, but there is an 11 millimeter and it actually happens to be turned right in the direction that we need to take it out, which is awesome. So I'm gonna go grab the 11 millimeter and take that bolt loose out of the steering shaft. Now I'm gonna have to take the 11 millimeter up top loose as well. I tried to push that off of the actual steering rack. It didn't want to come off because it needs to push up a little further. So just take this 11 millimeter out. It goes into the top side of the steering shaft. And we should be ready to pull the rack out of place. Now I've got that other 11 millimeter. We're going to attempt to pull the rack out. Chances are I'm going to knock over the camera, guys, so sorry in advance. It's probably going to happen. Hey, I didn't knock the camera over. Well, we have the rack off. It's obviously making a mess everywhere. Crap. I need to move this. Okay, so it had a big leak, guys. And, well, that's part of the problem. That's one of the reasons we're replacing it. I talked to the rack doctor who I got my Trans Am rack from, and he said that a lot of times when they're leaking, they will fill up the boot with oil. And so that's what we have right here. Man, this is a mess. We're gonna have to clean this up. All right, so I'm gonna clean this up real quick and then we'll get on to the pump. We are now ready to take the pump off. The first thing we're gonna take loose is the belt. Should be a 15 millimeter. Thought I had one out here, maybe I don't. Oh, yeah. So 15 millimeter to get the belt loose. Get it out of the way. And then the fun part begins, because you can take, and we're gonna have to take the pulley off of the power steering pump, but I don't have enough room to get a puller in here without taking the fans and the radiator out. So we are going to take it out the long way, which, if you guys have been watching my Trans Am, I made a wrench, a 15mm wrench that sets just behind this. The other two we should be able to get in there with this one here we can get out. There's three 15mm that come out. This one we can get to relatively easy. The other one I think we can get to with a swivel, but this back one, like I said, I took a cheap wrench and shaved it down where it'll fit on the back side of the power steering pump. And so that is what our next step is. We're going to get that out of the way, and then hopefully clean some of this stuff up and start putting it back together. But we will see, because I would also like to check out the ball joints, which means I'm going to have to take the brakes off and look at that stuff. So let's get this out of the way. Now the pump is out of the way, and I did make a mess. Obviously, you're going to make a mess. There's going to be stuff dripping out of the lines as you take the pump out of place, but wasn't too bad. Like I said, you need a shaved down wrench in order to get back there behind the pump. If you have a puller that will fit in there, I doubt you do. You can pull the power steering pump pulley off, and then you'll be able to do that. But we were going to replace it, and the main reason I wanted to get all this stuff out, and I'm not going to go directly to that because, like I said, I'm going to check out the ball joints, but we wanted to get this stuff out because there's core charges on both of these. Now, like I said, I'm going to be replacing, from the looks of things, it actually looks like my pump was leaking on the bottom side, and that was what was causing all of this. Now, the steering rack was leaking as well, but there's a core charge on these, and I want to ship them back. So I wanted to get those off today. Now, the next step, obviously, I'm going to clean this up a little bit, and I'm probably going to wrap it up in some paper or something to keep it from leaking, because UPS or FedEx sees a box leaking, they like freak out and think it's some chemical. So I do have to knock the tie rods off of it because I don't think it'll fit in the box with the tie rods on it. The other thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get my puller and pull this pulley off and then disassemble the actual plate that holds it in place, because the new one, while it does, you can just get the pump and the tank separate. I ordered the pump and tank together, but I'm going to have to use my pulley and my bracket. Now, obviously, like I said, we need to get the pulley off of this. So in order to do that, we've got a remover. Now, if you guys don't want to buy these, most of your local parts store will rent these out to you. But there's a little collar right here, and this sandwiches around that collar, and then you tighten it down, and that pulls the pulley off. So that is our next step. We're going to get this pulley out of the way, and then we'll be able to disassemble everything behind it. Once we got that pulley off, and as you can see, it was quite a process. This pulley is like super light, it's crazy. We're going to go ahead and take the two 13mm bolts off that hold the pump to the bracket. We're going to take both the lines off. This one's just a fillet or a flathead screwdriver, and then this is actually a 16mm to bust this line loose. Now, it's important that you do this first, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to reach it once the pulley's in place. So we're going to make sure that we transfer this before we put the pulley back on. All of this really needs to be done before the pulley goes back on. Well, guys, I failed. So here's what happened. This is all rounded off now. Can't get it. This is actually the new pump. I was able to get the nut out that goes here, and I thought maybe I could thread this in and it work out, but it's just not lining up. So we are going to have to order a new line, which isn't a big deal, but the problem is it's a couple days away. So we're going to move on to something else. As you can see, I did take the new upper piece off. I'm going to get this all cleaned up, the old one, and get it sent back because there is a core charge on this. And I want to put this one back together. And like I said, I'm going to have to order this line. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to get the new rack out of the box. Now, this is a reman. You can't buy a new one, at least that I know of. And I will list this in the description down below as well as the new power steering pump that I bought. And I'll list the lines as well, so if you have that same issue. But we are going to pull this out of the box, And the main reason I want to get this out is because I want to get the old one shipped back. So once we get the new one out of the box, I'm going to get the tie rod ends off of the old one and get it cleaned up a little bit, probably wrap it in some stuff so it doesn't leak everywhere, and get it shipped back, as well as the old pump, because like I said, there's a core charge on both of those. So let's open this up, get this one out of the box, kind of see what we've got, and then we will go start taking the tie rod ends and cleaning that one up. Well, I've got the old one all packaged up, so hopefully it doesn't leak and then not pick it up, but I think it'll be okay. We'll try to keep it with this side facing up. We're gonna tape this box up and it'll be ready to go, hopefully. And then all we have to do is clean the whole pump off and it should be ready as well. Well, unfortunately, guys, I'm not going to be able to put stuff back together today, but I did get everything packaged back up, ready to ship back off, and I got the bracket cleaned off camera, the pulley cleaned off, and all of the stuff that I need. So all I'm going to have to do is order that line, then I'll be able to put stuff back together. But let's move on to taking the brakes off. And the reason I'm going to take the brakes off, like I said earlier, is I'm going to make sure that the ball joints are all good, because I think at the same time that I'm putting in this rack in, I'm going to lower the car. So since I'm going to be lowering it, I'm going to have it aligned, obviously, because I'm putting a new rack in it. It's a great time to go ahead and do the lowering. The downside is the exhaust tank's really low on this car, and so I'm not really sure how much clearance we're going to have once we lower it. We'll just have to cross that bridge when we get there. But let's go ahead and get the brake off, and then we'll work at getting the spindle off and making sure that everything's nice and tight. If it is not, then we will be replacing the ball joints as well, but we'll cross that bridge also when we get there. So let's get the brakes off, get them out of the way, and well, like I said, move on to the ball joints. Well, guys, it has been a few weeks since I've been able to work on this, but in the video you guys cannot tell that. So we are going to get the brakes out of the way, like I said, just so we can see if, well, once we get the brakes out of the way and the spindle, we're going to see if the ball joints are good. So I just feel like with 200,000 miles, chances are the ball joints have never been replaced, and from the looks of it, they are still riveted in. So they are definitely the factory ball joints, because if it had been replaced, they would be bolted in. So let's get this out of the way. Just a couple metric wrenches, I think an 18 and a 19 to get the brake out of the way. I'm going to leave the brake line hooked up, so I'm probably going to suspend the brake somewhere here. But let's get this out of the way, like I said, and then we'll move on to checking out those ball joints. Well, now that we have the brake out of the way, we're going to go ahead and take out these cotter pins that hold the castle nut in place. And I always break these. I mean, you shouldn't reuse them anyway, but inevitably they're always a pain to get out. But once we get that out of the way, this is a 15 millimeter up top, and I'm pretty sure that it's an 11 on the bottom, and we'll be able to knock this loose and see if what's in here is good, which, to be honest with you, it feels like that they're pretty decent. So it's kind of surprising. Maybe the bottom one's been replaced because they press in, but we're really not going to know until we get it out of the way and actually can feel the piece itself while the spindle's out of the way. Because I mean, I could jiggle around on it, but there's really well, after getting this out of the way, the top ball joint is in great shape. It's cracked, the boot's cracked, so I may end up replacing that one. I'm not real sure. That one's pretty easy to replace. You just grind it out. The bottom one's in pretty decent shape too. It doesn't seem, the boot's kind of dry rotted, but it's not super loose. Now it's looser than a brand new one, but I think we're going to leave it alone. So I think our next step, guys, is we're going to go ahead, we're going to get this sway bar out of the way, and that's just a 15 millimeter on both sides, and then we're going to get the strut out of the way. And the reason we're going to do that is, like I said, we're going to be lowering it, So not a whole lot to do there. I'm gonna go grab my impact. We're gonna whip these out real quick. And same thing with the top. I'll show you on the top side when I go to the top of the strut how we're gonna take it out. Well, I lied to you guys. It's actually 13 top here, 13 bottom, 13 on the bottom, and then 15 on the top. So you think as many times as I've taken these things apart, I would start to remember. I knew it was metric. The other thing I'm gonna do is put a little bit of WD-40 on all these threaded ends, just to make it come apart maybe a little easier. This one actually looks like it might be a little loose, or they've replaced it in the past, but let's whip these out. Like I said, I'm gonna use my impact just to make things, well, easier on myself and quicker. Now you only have to take 4 more out in order to get the strut completely out of the way, and those are 15 millimeters on the front side where the stud sticks out, and then the ones that actually go into the unit itself down below are 13. So this is a little tricky to get to because your air conditioning line is in the way. If you have a ratcheting wrench, sometimes that helps. These are not super tight, so they're pretty easy to take out. Well guys, actually the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to do one more thing, and that is I'm going to knock the rivets out of this ball joint. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grind the heads off and then tap them out so we can replace this new ball joint. The new one will bolt in, and so in the next video obviously we will be bolting the new ball joint in and putting this all back together. But let's grab the grinder and a flap reel real quick. We'll knock these off. It should be relatively quick, and then get this old ball joint out. Well, it took some doing. I actually drove these out with a just kind of like a center punch, and it took a little bit. I had to heat them up, but they're out. So now we just got to do the other side. And like I said, on the next video, guys, we are going to be putting the new ball joint in. I'm going to clean these all up off camera, clean all this rust up, and give them a coat of paint.